and welcome to this episode of For Your Consideration. My name is Guy, and today I need your help. What I'm going to be doing is, sometimes when you're trying to create adventures, that sentence that I love so much just doesn't cut it. Or that it's not the first thing that pops into the old noggin. So in this case, I've got a one-shot which I'll be running tomorrow. And it's for a bunch of friends whom I haven't seen in a long time, and we only have a couple hours to play, so there's no point in developing a major master plot and going from there. This is just a once-off. Now, I had in my mind this opening for this one-shot, and I hope that it doesn't come from a movie, because sometimes I do wonder, it's like, oh, did that vision come from a movie or a book, or is that something that's actually a fairly original idea? Doesn't really matter how it plays out, of course, is what's going to make it original, but the problem is it's stumped me. I need to figure it out. So I'm going to use this video, and please indulge me, to try and work through this narrative, this one-shot, starting with an idea, starting with a visual image, and then trying to extrapolate how to take and make an adventure around that. So I hope that will be of use to you, because if you're like me, suddenly you look up and you go, I wonder what it would be like if that was like that. And then you have to try and figure out how to turn it into adventure. So this is the idea. It's a modern setting, so we're going to be using the D20 modern system, which I happen to be a huge fan of and have been ever since it came out. I was very upset when they took it out of print, but thankfully I managed to bring all of the books with me to Japan. So the D20 modern system allows you for all kinds of things, and one of those things is to incorporate supernatural elements, especially if you have the D20 Urban Arcana, but you don't even need that, really, if you've got the base rules, which thankfully I do. So the idea is that the party starts off as a bunch of friends who are about to go out on a stag night because one of the friends is getting married. That particular friend, however, has a delivery truck. They work as a blue-collar worker, a delivery truck driver. And all they have to do is they've got one last package which they need to deliver. It's a pine box about 5 foot long and about 3 foot wide, 3 foot square. Now, everyone, of course, knows what's inside that box, so that's nothing new. That box they take to a warehouse. They deliver it at the warehouse. As they deliver it at the warehouse, the customer walks forward and brazenly rips open the box, pulls out the young boy that's hiding or that is contained within it, and then tells the player characters, that this individual is going to eat all of them and that they're very appreciative for the delivery. It is at that point that my actual vampire hunter, because we now realize they're a vampire, bursts into the warehouse and engages the vampire in mass combat, well, not in dramatic combat. The characters are all level 3, so they're not very powerful, and they shouldn't be able to take on a vampire anyway. Of course, they should be shocked and in complete panic and chaos at this point if they're good players, because, well, we've only ever seen vampires in movies, as far as the setting is concerned. So that's it. It's at that point that the vampire hunter says to the characters, run, keep the boy safe until... And that's as far as I've got. So my sentence about a villain wanting something badly doesn't really work, because, well, there's the vampire who possibly will kill the vampire hunter, and then it could go from there. That doesn't really work. We've got a potential of a chase sequence. The players will be expecting that they are going to get chased by this vampire and that they're going to have to ultimately defeat the vampire. So that's what they're expecting, and I'm going to have to give that to them. But I don't necessarily want to make it too easy. I think that perhaps what I need to do is to look at it from the heroes want something badly and are having difficulty getting it. The heroes want to get away. If they have this young boy with them, what can I do with this young boy to make it more interesting? So we immediately think of movies like The Fifth Element, where the young boy has super martial powers and is the next vampire hunter. And that's why the vampire was so happy to destroy him, and why the original vampire hunter was so desperate to slay the vampire before he could slay the new prodigy that's about to be brought into the vampire hunting world. We could certainly do that, but again though, that takes away agency from the players being the heroes of the story. There's nothing wrong with that, it's a one-shot, I suppose. So there is that option. So either we try and focus on the vampire story in terms of hunting down the player characters, in which case the player characters need to be able to escape. That's the important thing, is that if it was just this powerful vampire and the player characters are just, one of them's a computer jockey, the other one's the driver of a truck company, the third one is a sort of a sporting jock, and the fourth one's a businessman. So they don't really have a huge amount of skills and things that allow them to hunt effectively or to have major combat. They can all fire a small round firearms, but they don't have any small firearms with them either. And of course they're in a modern day large city. I'm thinking of Chicago, or perhaps maybe London or Manchester perhaps. I thought about Tokyo since that's where I'm based, but it just doesn't feel right. Tokyo is very easy to move around on with the trains and things, although maybe that's what I could do. Maybe that's what I should do, is draw inspiration from the train systems here in Tokyo. Thankfully everyone who's playing has been to Tokyo, so they know all about that sort of thing. Maybe that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to redirect it. You see, that's why it's important to have these kinds of conversations. Now, I'm not advocating that all of you start a YouTube channel so that you can ramble on and try and discover the plot for your adventure, but I am advocating that you sit quietly and just let your mind wander in all different directions and look at it from the different components that you have. So we have a vampire who wants to get the boy. We don't know why the boy is important, although I am kind of liking the idea that maybe this boy is the next vampire hunter, but is not completely ready, is not trained, is not skilled, and so cannot defend themselves whatsoever. They're completely inept, but could slowly develop their skills. That also gives me a get out of jail free card, where the boy suddenly remembers an ancient piece of knowledge that's been passed down from vampire hunter to vampire hunter to vampire hunter. And so if the players get their characters into a situation where the characters are most likely going to die, I could have vampire boy hunter suddenly remember a move and decimate the vampire thralls that are chasing the heroes, which is inevitably is going to happen. So I kind of like that idea. Then the hero's perspective, they've got to try and get to somewhere. So I need to figure out where it is. It could be the lair of the vampire hunter, but he's not going to shout that out to them when he's busy attacking a vampire. So he's going to give them a clue. So maybe that's what I need to do, is set it up as a little bit of a mystery. Get to the fallen lady, or get to the brass lion. I'm not sure. Now that I'm sitting in Tokyo, I'll have to think about that. But something along those lines that the players can start to figure out and go, well, he could have meant this, he could have meant that, he could have meant the next thing. That means the vampire is doing the same thing. So I kind of like that, because it allows me to let the players have some agency whilst at the same time have this vampire trying to hunt them and not immediately find them as well. So I think that could work too. So now I need to go and find some kind of landmark within Tokyo that I can use cryptically, which may or may not get the characters to move forward. I'm actually thinking that they'll find some kind of underground subway tunnel system buried underneath the Shinjuku district, or something along those lines. I'm not sure. Anyway, I'll think about that. That's not for you necessarily to help me with. All right, so we're starting to get a story here. Now, I am drawing on elements of the 3-act structure. So I've got the introduction. We meet the vampire, we meet the vampire hunter, and we meet the vampire boy hunter that we now have to protect. So our players have a very clear goal. Protect the boy until... Well, now that's something that we've got to answer. So protect the boy until the vampire hunter can connect up with them, and then they are free to go about their daily business. Yeah, right. But it's a one-shot, so theoretically that's when it ends. So if that's what's the case, they need to protect until the vampire gets to them. So that means, of course, the vampire hunter dies, so that they realize they have to become the vampire boy hunter's supporters, if I'm making logical sense here. All right, so they have to become his supporters. That means they need to be skilled up and learn things. So am I going to do a Hellboy thing that underneath Tokyo City is this alternative world where there's fae and there's all the weird and wonderful Japanese demon-type creatures, as well as all kinds of other mixtures and things? by doing that, it turns it from being something that's potentially serious, and I mean, relatively speaking, to something that's potentially fantastical, which is not necessarily a bad idea. It is a one-shot. And then that allows them to get some cool stuff, especially if the vampire hunter throws them a bag of coins and says, get to the Shojin market. I have no idea what Shojin means. I don't think it means anything. It's just a word I made up. But if he says get to Shojin or something along those lines, then maybe that will help. Maybe they find a restaurant that's named Shojin, so they go inside that restaurant, but it seems to be absolutely normal until there's a vampire attack, and then they notice someone escaping underneath a trap door going down, or the elevator. Japanese buildings love their elevators. Maybe it's the elevator that's going down, and now I can have an encounter in the elevator. Oh, that's terrifying. I love encounters in elevators, where the elevator stops because their building loses power, and now they have to climb out of the elevator, and they realize at the bottom there's still light, but the bottom is, say, 10, 20 stories below them. That's, I think, particularly fun. All right, great. So now we're starting to build a narrative. And all that we did was we said, okay, we needed to introduce the idea, and then we needed to get them going on this journey. So now we're on this journey. They're now going to find Shojin market, where a few of those coins will get them some cool stuff. Now, they're going to need a guide or a scout in Shojin. So maybe what we need is we need to give them a guide at the nightclub that they go to. So Shojin nightclub, they meet someone. What if they met a succubus, or it's a bunch of guys that I'm playing with? So what if they met an incubus, a male version, and he tries to seduce them, realizes that he can't. They save him from a vampire, so he then will show them around Shojin market itself, and we'll get them some anti-vampire stuff, maybe like a collar of anti-biting, a revolver of silver bullet firing or wooden stake firing, some kind of cool stuff. All right, so we've got vampire encounter, we've got lift encounter, we've got Shojin, well, we've got nightclub encounter, we've got lift encounter, we've got Shojin markets. Then we need them to then go somewhere from there. So the vampire boy hunter needs to go somewhere. We need to get them somewhere. So the vampire hunter perhaps has left a message in Shojin market that if they meet him at the Sky Tree, which is this, it's one of the tallest towers in the world, and is particularly daunting if you go up it, having been up it myself. They need to go to, no, but that's more elevators. No, boring. Let's, do we want to make it old and mystical, in which case you need to go to one of the temples, perhaps? I'll think about it. Unless, of course, they have to take him to Mount Fuji, which, of course, would be expected. Actually, Odawara Castle is pretty cool. It's just south of Tokyo, and that's a pretty cool setting, especially if that's like the vampire nest, or if it's like, well, if it's the vampire hunter's base. That could be pretty cool. All right, so they're going to go to Odawara Castle, and that's, they take the bullet train to get there. So that's the Shinkansen, that's what it's called locally. They're going to take the bullet train to get there. Battle on the bullet train, that's pretty cool. They're moving at sort of ridiculously fast speed, and somehow the train operators are not vigilant, and they allow this battle to happen. Then they arrive at Odawara Castle, and that's where there's a giant showdown, because of course the master vampire has been tracking them all along. They find the vampire hunter there, but he is exceptionally wounded. He gives vampire boy hunter some information, and the heroes, now with all of their cool equipment, have this final battle and final showdown. That gives us this nice long narrative, nice long structure, and I think that is what we need to do. Shinkansen, the train ride, ultimately, if we follow narrative structure, on the train ride, when they're going to deliver the boy to Odawara Castle, they should be stopped and intercepted by the vampire, and they should be taken to the furthest point from their actual goal, their actual mission. So perhaps it's at that point that the vampire actually abducts vampire boy hunter, but he can't feed on him because it's during the day. So that gives them a time frame in which to find where he has been taken. Aha! And he has been taken to Odawara Castle, which is this vampire's nest. Now, the Shinkansen happens to go to Osaka and Kyoto and all those kinds of wonderful old cities. So perhaps that's where they're heading. It's actually heading to Osaka, and the Shinkansen is intercepted, and then they get stranded, and then they have to figure out where the hell he is. All right, I like that. So now I've just got to populate in some little details as to how to get from point A to point B to point C, but we've got some great moments. We've got the initial scene, which I had in my head. Then we've got the journey to Shigon Market, which is via a nightclub where there's going to be a little bit of a battle. Then we go into the elevator where there's another battle. We then go market shopping because PCs love to go shopping. Then we get onto the Shinkansen where we have a battle on the Shinkansen. Then we're at our furthest point. Where did they take the boy? They must have taken him to Odawara Castle. Right, then we break into the castle. Big battle. Concluded, done and dusted. Thank you very much for listening and for helping me solve my problem. And I hope that is going to help you the next time you have an idea for a cool scene and then you start to extrapolate. Look at what elements you have to play with. Look at what your players are going to be expecting and then give it to them, but in a slightly different way. I think this is a slightly different way, although it's pretty predictable. They get to decide where to go. They get to decide how they want to play it out. And of course, they're going to do completely different stuff, which is absolutely fine as well. I will go along with it, but I've got my bigger picture. I've got my bigger plan. So we are sorted. So there is that flexibility that comes in from having a bigger plan. And now I can work out the minutiae as we go along. Anyway, I hope this has helped you maybe look at how to do things in a slightly different way than I normally prescribe on the channel. And there you go. We now can fill in that sentence if we want to. The vampire wants to slay the vampire boy hunter before he comes of age so that he no longer poses a threat. He's having difficulty doing that because a bunch of heroes are saving the vampire boy hunter from him. So there's our narrative. Anyway, until next time, I wish you and yours the very happiest of playing.